in agreeing to or deciding to come back to teach at Ashesi, I said to myself and to Ashesi, I want to bring back what my elders would say, Nkuku ninkaka. Can you say that? Nkuku ninkaka. Years of gathering here and there, putting all this together and bring them to one place. Because I had been blessed so much for almost 40 years in the US and 35 years in the classroom, from seminary to undergraduate to graduate school, producing some PhDs. I realized that bringing and doing international education, bringing American students to virtually every part of Africa, north, south, east, and west, for them to learn so much about Africa and to write about Africa. Whenever I came to visit, I brought them together with young Ghanaian people, young South African people, Egyptian people, Tanzanian people, Kenyan people. It turned out that these American young people were learning more about Kenya than Kenyans knew themselves. So I said, why don't I relocate and encourage my people to also begin to understand that there is a history in your past. In putting this piece together, I am reminded of one of the most wonderful sages, a wise person that the diaspora has produced, Bob Marley. Bob Marley. So in calling this memory, hope, and identity, the Africana experience, I'm taking a cue from Bob Marley. And guess what I started? He was one person following the Rastafarian tradition who appropriated the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, to talk about the global black experience. Remember one thing? By the rivers of Babylon, la, la, la. You remember that? La. So I begin from that. Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. And it has a context. The fall of Jerusalem was about 587 BCE. It saw the destruction of the entire temple, the beautiful temple built by Solomon. And the people were carried away into exile, Babylon. And there was no way of going back. So how do you retain the history, the memory, the root within you? And so they designed a system. The presence of the temple will be with you whenever you meet your fellow Jew and you said, the peace of the Lord be with you. The presence, Hebrew word, Shekinah, will be with you. And so just say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Just by saying that to your neighbor and your neighbor responding was a way of maintaining your roots, no matter where you will be. So how shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? How do we practice our culture in a foreign culture, in a foreign language, in a foreign environment? And so look at how Bob Marley phrased it. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered our past, our ancestry. Why is Zion so much appealing to Bob Marley, to the Jews, and to the Rastas? Because there's a relationship between the temple and your personal Zion. I am weaving my story into what I'm saying. The personal Zion is where you learned your first word, where you were taught your first language, the basics of your culture, including your dance, your design of clothing, your personal Zion. Okay? Where you ate your first solid food, kenke, fried chicken, grits, lasagna, Gambo, Aprapransa, Mbotompoto, hey, Tosafi, how about Ghanaian or Nigerian jollof? Your personal Zion. My own personal Zion was in a small village, remote village in the Afran Plains in eastern Ghana. I remember a very small church co-founded by my father around 1948. We had no piano, no kind of Western instrument, no modern nothing, as it were, as Americans would say. But we had some iron instrument called frichua, where you would just put in your fingers and say, ka, 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 ka. And then the music director, who happened to be my own father, will call the tune, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You see, do that. And then you pick up the tune and sing in harmony. If you failed, we tried again, until we got it in harmony. I watched my father, his powerful patience, leading a group, leading a choir. And I said, yeah, I want to be like him when I grow up. Guess what? It came earlier than I thought. I was 12 years old. My father had traveled. They had to go to a musical competition. And they said, hey, your father is not there. Your turn. I was too short to conduct the music. I was put in the chair. And I did it. I remember my Zion. I was in Zion where I began and was taught to pour the libation to my ancestors, using the right language, following the ritual with surgical precision, libation. At the same time, I learned to pray in church. See how my life worked out? In my kind of Zion, you prayed the same prayer again and again and again until you knew the prayer by heart, as you say in Zion. Moreover, I learned to dance in Zion. Hey, talk about dancing. I learned to dance in Zion to the beating of my ancestral drums at Tumpai. The history and glories of my ancestors were repeated at every gathering. We were taught to remember that there's a history in our past. We were constantly reminded that if you forgot the sound of your ancestral drums, you will get missing in a crowd. So, I am talking about memory, hope, and identity among Africana people, beginning with my own experience. I am talking about the global black experience, Africa and the diaspora. Africana meaning the global black family. There we sat and wept when we remember. Remember, the word remember simply means get connected with me. The opposite of remember is what? Dismember. For one thing, memory is like a wound that doesn't bleed, but it can hurt. Memory can inspire. So when you are in the diaspora, you remember to hope, to plan, to focus. But you may also be angry. You can weep, sigh. You may give up hope of ever returning to Zion. Therefore, remember, among the people of the Gold Coast who were shipped from Comanche Fort to today's Jamaica by the Spaniards, followed by the English, their constant statement was, Jamaica, Jamaica. It looks like we are stuck here forever. Jamaica, Jamaica. Eventually, that phrase morphed into the word Jamaica. Jamaica, Jamaica. Eventually, these people who couldn't come back remained there and developed their own brand of English today called patois. If you hear a Jamaican talking, oh Lord, it's so musical. Jamaica, Jamaica. Meaning that in the diaspora, when you lose your Zion, you learn to speak a second language. In a foreign land, memory is survival. Creativity is survival. In fact, You are in a foreign land when the tunes are not familiar, when the accent is so different. You may lose control of your own dignity. You may hear words like, you are an illegal, you are an alien, you are undocumented. So, a formerly proud medical officer in Ghana or Nigeria will end up being a janitor, a security officer, a watchman in New York City. You may see snow for the first time, but you have to walk through the snow and go to work dressed like an Eskimo. So the loss of Zion can affect you. Your self-esteem, your manhood, your womanhood, your personhood, your identity. To begin to learn a new language, or even if you knew that language in Zion, you may need to adopt a new accent. Or else you hear things like, what language is that? Speak English. Though you know that you are in the diaspora. So this brings us to Africana migrations, global migration of African people, forced and voluntary. Africana people are now located in various regions of the world, not by accident, but through deliberate historical design. From the mother continent to the Middle East, through the Arab slave trade, through the Sahara Desert. And guess what? They even asked us to forget who we were. And so, beginning with our names, you dared not use your own name, Kunta Kinte. From now on, your name is Toby, Margaret, Gifty, Comfort, Andrew, Nelson, Marcus, Susanna, Millicent, Robert. You are no longer Mawuse. You are no longer Chukwuemeka. You are no longer Chiemere. You are no longer Babatunde. You are no longer Mandela or Ofosu, Diawo, Osabute, Obiri, Ampadu, Adeze, Manle, Tewia. No. These are primitive, uncivilized names. So, how do I sing? I learned to sing in Zion. Now I am in Babylon. Bob Marley will say, how do I sing? Remember, the psalm Bob Marley alludes to is a very painful psalm contextually. It celebrates your glorious past. Compare it with your sorrowful, difficult present as an African. The tension between the past and the present. So you sit in a very Semitic pose where you move up and down and sometimes throw ashes on yourself. So how could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? African people always brought with them the songs of Zion, their ancestral songs from their roots. And now, Africana people are blessed with what I call melodic improvisation. We can transform Babylon's funeral dirges into songs of joy. Think of how we have formulated new music, reggae, jazz. What about Afrobeats as evidence of the gifts of melodic improvisation? So the answer to the question by this time emerges for you and for me. How can we sing? Now, for me, the answer becomes another question. How can we not sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? But the answer also raises another question. How do we sing it? And again, the answer becomes, we shall sing the Lord's song in defiance and in hope. Simply put, the historical context I've explained have questioned our humanity. And so we're able to form a new identity like the Maroons, the Rastas, the Gallus, the Columbus, the city. We have formed new identities. Our creativity enabled and helped us to survive and thrive. Memory was their vital force that shaped their hope and identity. This is how Africana people and cultures have changed and are changing world cultures. But let me move to a close by raising some challenges for me and for you as young people. What then defines the task for this new generation and beyond. From the perspective of the Africana global experience, the present and future generations of Africana people should use the African past, our root, as a resource to become global citizens. A citizenship proudly rooted in what Molefe Ketiye-Santi called Africanity. And I will suggest 4 tasks for you to think about as a challenge. Number 1, you need to develop a sense of history. Second, I want you to be anthills of the savannah. Again, following Achebe, as a discursive metaphor to indicate that for Africana people, hope is always under threat. Hope is always under threat. The anthill remains after the devastation of the grass to remind the next generation that, hey, don't take your freedoms lightly. People died for you to be free today. Don't take your presence at Ashesi here for granted, because people struggle for you to be at Ashesi today. And so look at the red flag in all our national flags, made popular by no other than Marcus Garvey, a descendant of the Maroons, to remember the blood shed for you to enjoy today. The third point, with a sense of history and as anthills of the savannah, strive to mainstream indigenous African ideas. Strive to mainstream indigenous African ideas from traditional irrigation methods called Tassa, used in Mali and Burkina Faso, or Gacaca, the judicial system used in South Africa and Rwanda after apartheid and the genocide. Even though our memories have been wounded as African people, let us proudly and fiercely go back to our roots and reshape our identity. Let us embrace our roots, our ancestry. But finally, let us listen carefully so we may hear the meanings of the words around us. The Fantis, before they do anything, they'll say, "Tie Nazi." Listen so you may hear. Listen to the language. Names shape identity. For the Asante people, the threat and oppression of the Denchira people made about 7 lineages come together to form a union to defeat Denchira. And so the word Asante means Osainti. We came together because of war. So language has power and identity. So our sage, Kofi Asare-Opoku, has reminded us, borrowed water does not quench thirst. May we keep memory and hope as sources of our identity based on our roots. Thank you very much.